What's up, Call of Duty fans? Welcome back to Checkmate Gaming. I'm Hold Shift, and we're going to be talking about day one from the Florida home series, recapping all of the action, giving you the highlights, and then getting you set up for day number two with a couple of predictions, and maybe some things that might change your mindset about some of the squads leading from day one to day number two. Let's start things off with where the broadcast actually started, which was in Group B. Again, Atlanta playing up against Paris would be our first match. We would get London versus Optic for the second, and then we would go to Group A for the rest of the games. Atlanta versus Paris. Expectations were pretty high for the side of the Atlanta phase, pretty much all the way through this match. I mean, I don't think anyone out there was sitting here thinking that, oh, well, Paris, they'll 100% not just have a shot, but could very well win this matchup. But Azir Cave was the first map. Paris was off to a great start, maybe showcasing that those sentiments were not 100% correct. Unfortunately, though, ATL would fight back, Major Maniac having himself a great game along with Simp and Abizi as they typically do, and with that, it would be 250-212 going the way of Atlanta. But the interest would not die down there. St. Petro for the Search and Destroy. Paris would kind of milk out the clock a little bit, play things very slowly, wait for dead silences, execute late in the round in their offenses, and was working for them very, very well with their early pace being established. It forced Atlanta to respond. But of course they did. Of course they responded. We would eventually go to a round 11 where Atlanta was able to take things 6-5. Gunrunner for the domination. Again, this is not where the interest would be lost for Paris. You're already sitting here saying that, wow, we really had a chance at the first map. Should have taken map 2 in a lot of people's minds. And now you find yourself up early on the Gunrunner domination, where honestly speaking, it just looked like Atlanta was getting a little bit too cute with how they wanted to play the map instead of just playing for A and B. When they had the A flag, they went for a couple of really long flanks to get a couple members over towards C when they were on the A side. It led to them getting flipped out spawn-wise, and well, from there, just too many small moments that Paris were able to take advantage of. They took the map 148-145. But unfortunately, that's where the interest would die off. St. Petro hardpoint, Simp and Abizi did not give Paris a chance as they were up almost 100 to like 15 at one point in time early in the first rotation. Paris would give it a go, but it wasn't really ever all that close. 250-117. Atlanta get into the winner's bracket finals, if you want to call it that, winner's qualifier, at a scoreline of 3-1. Optic Gaming and the London Royal Ravens would be up next. And now, like I mentioned, this very well had the makings of what could be a very competitive game. Our biggest question marks were about Chino specifically, and we didn't really get our answer right away as it'd be Hackney Yard for the hard point. First, Shawnee was really, again, looking very, very well done today. He played extremely well. Wuskin as well would slap around OGLA, specifically Kenny or Quavo. He went 18-36. GG, 250-194. Hackney Yard goes the way of London. But then we get the Search and Destroy. This is where I thought that for Optic, this would be their hardest game mode to really come back into. It'd have to be. You felt like it was going to be because, again, you're adding in somebody new. But Slasher says, get on my back. I've got this. He clutched not just a 1v2, but also a 1v3 back-to-back. Had a chance later in the game for a potential 1v4, which he just did not have quite enough time to make the challenge happen with. But regardless, Optic Gaming very solid throughout their Mazda Search and Destroy. They take it 6-2. Gunrunner would be our domination. This is, like I mentioned in our preview setup, where Optic Gaming had been showing a lot of progress, and it would need to be that way in this weekend if they want to have a chance to win a couple of games. Chino played extremely well here. This was his real coming out party, it felt like, and Optic Gaming LA looked pretty darn polished on their domination, especially playing from the A side of the map on Gunrunner. 185-136 Optic roll. So now we've got Optic up 2-1. London, do you have what it takes? Backs up against the wall. Again, we don't know how exactly well proven this team has been up to this point. London, simply put, Gunrunner hardpoint, a little worried about them. Didn't need to be. They played this map very, very well, 250-185. So, map 5 is the ice there. That's the question. London would go down 2-4 early. Wuskin, the sniper rifle, we've needed to see it pop up. We talked about how we needed to see him show up in the Search and Destroy. He did. So many pivotal moments put on by London to take 4 rounds in a row, with Shawnee beaming a 1v2 at the end to clutch up against Kenny, who did not have a series worth remembering. 6-4 the score. Piccadilly would go the way of London, and so would the series, 3-2. So taking a look before we go into Group A, here's the moment where I'll break down what we have got coming forward with the rest of the games in this group Tomorrow, we've got Paris and Optic playing up against each other in the losers bracket, and we've got Atlanta and London playing for a qualifier spot. Let's start with Paris going up against Optic. Did we see enough from either of these teams to put it a little bit of extra favor towards one over the other? Personally speaking, Paris played cleaner throughout the day. They have less gaps in their complete whole system than Optic currently do. My general reaction is Paris should be the favorite going into this. My biggest question mark, though, for Paris is, can you continue to do well in the domination? Again, they lost their last 5 straight. For Optic Gaming LA, they've been looking better in their domination as a whole. Can they continue to be consistent there? That is going to have to be the case. You're going to have to take this map 3 away from Paris, I think, if you're Optic. Yes, their hardpoint looked okay today. It did not look nearly as good as Paris's did, at least not in the Azir Cave initially. Obviously, St. Petra was a bit of a wash, but similarly so was kind of the gunrunner by the end there in the London series. So for me, this one's going to just be a very 50-50 battle, but I've got a little bit more favor going to Paris simply due to the fact that we don't have a wild card in the mix here. This is the consistent pick. It's the tried and true one. Optic Gaming has been a wild card. If they show up and play a good day of Call of Duty, yeah, I could see them potentially getting into the playoff. I mean, it's very possible that they very well could, but is it likely? I don't think it's very likely. I've got Paris taking this set 3-2. And then you look at Atlanta going up against the London Royal Ravens. Again, for London, I think you're a bit concerned about what happened in that domination, but similarly so, I think you're a bit concerned about Atlanta FaZe and their domination, of which they've dropped now 2 in a row, one being to Dallas, the most recent being obviously today. But if their hardpoint stays consistent, I don't see a world where London has a chance to really battle up against Atlanta in this series. London has been playing a little bit all over the place. Yes, they've looked relatively decent in their last handful of hardpoints. This will be a rematch from the early parts of the Chicago series, of which Atlanta took in a close but still 3-0. And I think there's going to be a lot learned for both teams going into that. I think specifically for Atlanta, it's a couple of corrections here or there, but it's also, this is where we don't want to play London. Let's put them on some bad maps and put the map pool in our favor. I've got Atlanta taking this one 3-1. Now, that means that we will also have the losers qualifier as well. That's all stipulation. Personally speaking, I think it's going to be down between Paris and London. And I think that game, honestly, as much as I want to say London could move through that, I think if Paris can find some momentum and just build off whatever they find versus Optic, I could see a world where Paris gets into this playoff over London. I know initially I was talking about how I think London can make the playoff this week. Paris is, again, kind of showing me that they are a very consistent team. Last time these two teams played, it was in Minnesota, which it was a 3-0 to Paris that time around. It was, again, a close 3-0, but regardless, I've got favor. I think that Paris can absolutely get out of this bracket and get into the playoff. I think it's going to be close. Regardless, I think it's going to be a Game 5 matchup. I think it, again, comes down to the domination. I know it seems like I'm default just saying that at this point, but simply put, these two teams are right around the same ballpark when it comes to domination, specifically the 7th and the 8th team. Paris has a slight advantage when it comes to the Search and Destroy, and a slight advantage, I guess, by win record when it comes to the hard point, but London has a better map differential, like a point differential in the hard point. So I've kind of got it as London a little bit more favor when it comes down to the hard point. Paris a little bit more favor when it comes to the search. Dead even when it comes to the dom. It comes down to the dom in my mind of who comes out of this bracket into the playoff. Let's take a look at Group A, though, which is where we actually finished all of our action. So we'll start talking Toronto going up against New York. A lot of people, myself included, said, hey, New York looked pretty good last time we saw them, but Toronto did not look like any slouches the last time we saw them play either. My biggest question would be, would there be consistent help for Cammy? The answer came through, but not very quickly. Mac is a special player. He truly is, and he showcased that once again in the Gunrunner hardpoint up first. Simply put, he's been by far the best and biggest pickup out of the AM scene this year. Huge moments from New York, allowing them to get the 250-214 win initially. That's where things would start to go wrong. Classic looked really good in the Arklov Peak Search and Destroy, popped off a number of different times, and one of my concerns for New York were their Search and Destroy and their domination. 2 points of contest, which they've looked a little bit wishy-washy on over the last couple of weeks since they added Mac into the mix, and well, that would continue to be the case here as Arklov Peak would go 6-2 for Toronto. Go to the domination. New York is 1-9 at this point going into this dom period. It would be 1 in 10. New York really needs to go back to the lab here on domination. This was a series that, or map rather, I should say, that they should have won. But again, the ice, when it came down to clutch time, was not there. Toronto was able to capitalize on. And again, even though Toronto's not been historically a great domination team, they sure looked like it in the closing 2 minutes. 156-154 was the Hackney Yard dom. Send it to a map 4 and send New York to the losers bracket, because even though they didn't look necessarily all that bad, Toronto, when there's help for Cammy, are a different breed of monster, and maybe I'm sleeping on them a touch too much, because simply put, they looked very solid and very sound throughout the Petro hardpoint. 250-182. Toronto move into the winners bracket to face up against the winner of our marquee matchup, which is Minnesota versus Florida. Thought this one was going to go 5. Had the makings of a game that could have gone 5. Super competitive set all the way through. Ramaz would be our first map, where again, it was super competitive, back and forth, picking right up where these two teams left off when they previously met in a grand finals. But Minnesota kept a small edge when it came to breaking the key hard points, and that was going to be enough for them to take a 250-210 win. St. Petro for the search and destroy. This one was a bit of a comical one for a number of different reasons, most notably Florida for getting the bomb a couple of rounds where they could have potentially clutched up. But simply put, this was a search and destroy that came down to 1v1s, 2v1s, and very small abbreviated numbers. And simply put, Minnesota Rocker, they put themselves in the position to clutch up with the ice, and they found the favor in those low number scenarios. They take this one at a very tight, I will say, 6-2. Going into the domination, it was looking like a great start for Florida after the first half. They had a narrow lead from the bad side of the map, but again, Minnesota is just so good and calm when it comes to playing with their backs a touch up against the wall. They know what plays need to happen, and they're able to convert mostly on the back end of Silly, who had an incredible series here, and it would be a 162-154. Minnesota take Florida in 3 maps, but all of them were very close. So you take a look at what we have to finish off. We'll go to the bottom side of the bracket first. New York versus Florida. Do you think that New York can actually beat the Florida Mutineers? And I don't see a world where, based on what we saw today versus Toronto, that they're going to have enough manpower to beat up against Florida. This would be the second time these two teams have played. The first time was back in LA, if you want to count that for anything. And Florida was able to take the series 3-1. They took both hard points relatively closely, but then they blew this New York team out of the water when it came to the nomination. And that's where my biggest worry is even if New York looks good and takes both the hard points, I don't trust their search against this Florida team, who again is not great but not bad. And then on the flip side, this is the 3rd best team in domination. So I don't see a world where 1 in 10 turns into 2 in 10 for New York. I've got Florida taking this one in 4, 3-1. Then we go to the winners bracket matchup. I don't think we'll be here for that long. Minnesota and Toronto, last time they played, it was a while ago. It was back in the Minnesota homestand for the Battle of the North. We'll have that once again. Last time it was a 3-1, relatively convincing for Minnesota with the exception of the search and destroy. It looks like most of their search and destroy problems have, I won't say fully been worked out, but they're playing low number situations very, very wisely. And I don't see a world where Toronto is going to be able to take enough power away from Minnesota to take this series. Again, yes, they're good at search. That's their best mode. And maybe they do take that away from Minnesota. But the problem is the respawn, where Minnesota are looking way too good. Again, I've got Minnesota in 4, a 3-1 score, which would then put Florida up against Toronto. Sorry, Toronto. I just don't see a world where you're beating Florida here. I got Florida working their way through the bottom side of the bracket. Again, the respawn's just too good for Florida and Minnesota in this pool collectively. So I've got Florida taking that one probably 3-0, to be honest, depending on where the search is played and who has what picks. I think Florida could take Toronto 3-0. Just depends on who picks first, I think, when it comes down to who's got what search pick. That's what I got for you guys. What did you think of the games today? Let me know in the comment section below, and catch me back again tomorrow or tonight, depending on when you're watching it, after day 2, so we get the recap going for that and set up championship or playoff Sunday, whatever you want to label it as. Make sure you subscribe on your way out. Until the next video, hope you guys keep holding it down. So long.